being very detailed. I guess you would call, I would consider myself an impressionist. I can get detailed if I want. I have done some portraits, but even with the portraits, I'll use more brush with a portrait, but I still find myself, it used to be, like I said, I'd grab a brush if that was my go-to. And now, if I'm having trouble with a brush, I grab my palette knife. And the thing that I like too, especially for plein air, is this is cleanup. So I can be gone, break down and go, and I don't have as much cleanup as worrying about making sure I washed every brush. Plus, I'm not as likely, it's not always, but I'm not as likely to muddy with a palette knife, because every time you wipe the palette knife, unless you're continuing to wipe in one area, it's clean. So the next color I pick up is clean. Rather than with a brush, the brush in and of itself, you can't get rid of, at least with oil, you can't get rid of the color out of the brush. So you continue to have residue, and pretty soon your brush is muddying paint, maybe when you don't want it. Sometimes it's okay. So I'm putting a little bit of warmth in there, but that's more subtle now. I mean, there's more to do, but okay, I'm gonna step back again. Still a little bright, but for right now, like I say, it's a pass. And until I can look at it with everything going on at the same time, if one area is standing out and I haven't done it, see, I grabbed some paint. Now, when I'm home and I don't need to put my palette up here so that you can kind of see what I'm doing, I have more room. So I'm putting a little bit of green in here. I see some green, kind of yellowy green in some areas. There's yellowy green in here, but there's also some red. So, and you notice I'm calling this red, it's kind of a rusty color. So when, especially with neutrals, I'm always asking myself, where is this leaning? Because a gray green, so some of these greens are pretty gray green or browny green. So if we're taught as kids, you know, trees are green. So we tend to grab whatever green we have, which is lots of times Viridian, and we stick it everywhere. And it's too strong for outdoor. So I try to say to myself, instead of this is green, well, it's not completely. It's greener here. There's more yellow green here. It's got some red in there. I see red. And so if a lot of other people would probably call it brown, but it's a reddy brown. So I tend to ask myself, I use the primary, maybe secondary colors to say, where do I see red? And so if I look in this picture and say, where do I see red? Or you know, they're orangey reds, you know, I can say all of that's reddy orange, but so is this in the shadows. You know, this is. This is more yellowy, strong yellow, you know. I can get back up to the sky. I put the sky in kind of yellowish with mostly white. So here's one of the things I do to soften tops and things. So I haven't finished the sky, but I put it in a yellow with white. But say I want to create some feeling of sky going over some of these areas, I can pull down and pull some of the sky over, and then I can always go back in and add. But I don't do this, so I'm going to do it. Do you see what happens? So every time, if I'm trying to create a little bit of a softness between my sky and the trees, then I'm pulling down only, wiping my palette knife, and then, so by doing that, I hope you saw, maybe I'll do it again, you can tell how it's softening. So right now, that looks like an area further back, and you know, I might say, oh, that might be a little too much, but then go back in and I'm seeing a little more. So same thing, I could do that. Just soften the tops. And then I can go in, I see a little more yellow up here. So I can reestablish, but also add another color. So I'm kind of keeping, so now I'm trying to sculpt a little bit to get the feeling, you know, that branches are in and out. They're not straight. And then I also try to make sure I'm not making things like lollipops, which is really easy to do. And then all of a sudden your trees look a little too contrived. So I'm constantly looking at shape. This is where the sky's coming in. But making a sense of, and then say this should be darker than the sky because it's part of the tree, you know, there's surrounding it. So I could even darken this just a smidge. But then I can also, this is it says green, but it's not. I use this for a dark. But say I want to create, well, I shook. But that's okay. So I'm loading this more on the side of the palette knife. Trying to do this. There we go. You know, maybe I'll do something. I don't like that. But anyway, just trying to put in the feeling of trees, but you shouldn't have a shaky hand. So I would normally have, oh, where's my, what did I do with that? Oh, here, maybe I can use this. There we go, a little bit better. But you know, that's one of those things, you don't like it, scrape it off and put it in again. So it's a little thick. I can adjust it, I can take it out. Anyway, putting in something like that that kind of helps create that feeling of some trees. There may be another one going crisscrossing that way. Anyway, I don't want it that long. But you can create some little feeling, you know, without getting too involved. So, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the computer. So I'm going to take a little bit more of this green. So I've done some stuff there. It's not finished. But I may want to try to do a little bit more down here. So trying to work around, this is ending up being more involved. So letting that be a little bit of a dark area is fine. I'm getting lost. All right, there we go. So letting there be a little bit more orange in there. So I start off with a big blob, and then I start, like I say, sculpting. And I'm always considering whether I'm creating more light or turning it more into shadow, because it makes a difference. I want those areas showing. Anybody have questions? You're welcome to, you know, ask questions if there's something I haven't addressed that.
Rhonda, would you consider discussing your palette, how you've laid out your palette? Is that a gray palette paper?
Yes, this is my traveling palette that goes with me when I paint outdoors. And this is the throwaway palette. And I like the gray because it helps me judge the values better. The white's too stark. And so what I've actually done is I have a big sheet of plastic on my big table for when I'm working on big paintings. And I put the gray under that, the paper, so that I've got a neutral, a mid value to help me determine, because you can see I have a tendency to go light. And we all have tendencies, and a lot of people who have worked in watercolor will go light. I'm not a watercolorist, but so I've been trying to force myself to make sure I get the darks in, because I used to get accused, people would say, oh, you're a pastelist. No, it's not under glass. Oh, I thought you were a pastelist. Your colors just look like they're pastel. So I've been trying to make sure I get the darks in, but I tend to lose them easily. And so then I have to go back in and reestablish. And that is why, you know, trying to get somewhere sometimes. I am not the fastest painter. You know, there are some people that, you know, do something in an hour and a half and they're done. I tend to take a little bit longer. So for right now, let's see. I do want to kind of, let's use a smaller palette knife. So I do have a palette knife. So they come in all shapes and sizes. This palette knife has a point, so that maybe when I want to come in here, there's a dark. So I can start creating, you know, a little bit of changes in here. And it doesn't have to be tremendous for right now, but just trying, like I say, this is kind of like sculpting, in the sense that you're trying to create and trying to keep it loose enough so that it doesn't, you know, I don't want the edges really tight. Anything else about palette knives? Oh, the other thing, I did say it, I put my paint out pretty much the same way all the time. This is my travel, so things get scrunched into this. On my big palette, my warm colors are down the left side of my painting, of my palette, and the cool colors go across the top. So usually I have yellows down here, maybe yellow ochre, orange, red, permanent rose, maybe alizarin crimson, something like that. I don't usually have these many paints out. But I traveled yesterday and stayed, like I said, because of a different painting. So my usual is 2 yellows, 2 blues, 2 reds. But like I said, because of the glass, I ended up with a whole lot more blues yesterday. And then for this, I stuck more yellows because of, so I'm not one that feels like I have to use the exact colors all the time. You know, a limited palette is great. But because I do a lot of the mixing of my colors on the palette, I tend to use a little bit more mixing on the palette other than the painting. I'm going to darken some of this, setting my focal point a little bit defined more. And but I just want bits. I don't want to change the color completely. There is, so I do want to establish or get that feeling like doing something like that where I'm starting to get that feeling that it's going up a bit. To start establishing that this, here we go again. I'm used to standing right in front of my painting so I can get it everywhere, but you've got to be able to see. So it's always a little more awkward. Just putting a little bit of these other colors in here to kind of get the sense. Now, you notice I'm not putting the tree trunk. I could, you know, if I want to start getting that trunk in, but put the trunk in if I feel fairly satisfied with the colors I've got underneath. But then I can start, you know, putting something in, and then remembering that a tree grows kind of, I used to make things too rounded, and they're actually using the palette knife is good for me because it makes me keep the branches chunkier. And then, you know, they'll fold out something like that. They're chunkier. And then there is some bright, bright yellow there. I don't know that I'm ready for that, but, you know, the sunlit side, once again, let me see if I can do this. I need my, I have a walking stick that sometimes I use for this. And my son put his back out in this, a perfect size for him to use while his back was out, and it is out. Okay, so I'm getting too much paint on that, so out it goes. Now I'm looking at this with Mother Nature. I'm always saying to myself, this Mother Nature, this is not a park where, you know, janitors and gardeners come in and take the chainsaw and go straight across, straight down, and you end up with a lot of hedge looking things. In Mother Nature, you seldom have that. So whenever I see too much of a straight line, like there, I get up. And these are kind of running together, so I could pull this something like that, where I'm creating. Now, I may need to go a wee bit darker behind to get that to pop a little bit more. So I'm always adjusting back and forth, back and forth. But that's starting. Normally, I wouldn't have put the tree in just yet, but just so you can kind of see what's happening and why. This is too strong, so I'm going to go back into the water. And what I did with the water is I put the reds in, and then I just crashed over them with this bluish color. So I can create those streaky things by pulling the palette knife this way. And it may need a little bit more to go up. Let's make it work. But you can see I end up using, you probably think, oh, this is too strong. Doesn't need to be that strong, which it doesn't. But this is a little bit of a magenta. So I'm going to put a little of that in there and then add some more white, so that I've got a dull red that will work better in this water, that it's not too different. It's a little bit lighter, but I'm just letting these pull up, pull down, and letting them interact. And it's what I say, you get kind of happy accidents sometimes, that you can sit there and painfully try to draw something perfect. But I can put these colors in using the palette knife and letting them kind of go up and down and starting to get that feeling. Then I can do, well, maybe I'll use a little tiny bit. So with water, if you streak across this way in a few areas, then you get that feeling of water movement. So you can, you can go back and forth between, depending if you've got a bunch of reflections or not, and you can create that feeling. So maybe in this case, I'll orange this way now over the top. So I can play back and forth. This is kind of in my mood. This is the tricky part. Okay, I'm gonna get this. Oh, I see what's happening. Thank goodness I caught that. This needs way darker. So it's easy for me to do with that out of the way. But you can see not being very particular. Now I kind of like, oh, that's the reflection of the house. So I took it out. Okay, scratch that. So that's something to remember too. If you take something out, then you don't need the reflection in the water. But I do need the reflections of where, like this one that's probably, so a pink, where the water is light. So I'm putting a little bit of light blue over the top now, but I don't want to totally kill the pink. So with water, you know, we tend to say water's blue. There's not a lot of blue in that water. But our tendency is to paint water blue, and sometimes the blue, if you only use blue, is too cold. So a little pink, a little bit of yellow in the water, it feel like sunlight. So when I'm looking at this, I'm gonna take some white, I'm gonna put a smidgen of yellow. There was already some pink there. So I wanna make sure, so I have a, I almost went there. This is I want to make sure that's pretty nice. And letting that go up so that, and then this is there, but it's not as strong as there. I don't want to draw too much attention to the bottom, but it doesn't hurt to have some. What time are we? Oh, 10 minutes. Any more questions? I mean,
Rhonda?
there's a whole, yeah.
Rhonda,
Yes.
this is Chris. I know your water is always so beautiful. Can you share a few more of your special water tips, tricks?
It's a lot of it is paying attention to me, water, a lot of water is horizontal. And so getting those strokes in somewhere. So like this probably looks more like water. I haven't stepped back. Let me step back. It's getting there. So the two things to remember about water, well, is if you don't vary the colors. So right now this is a little too, value-wise, a little too much the same. So I'm gonna have to adjust more. But right now we're working on a two-dimensional surface, correct? So it means you only have the bottom left to right to deal with. But water is this way, right? It's not a wall. So in a painting, if you're not careful about water, if you make the values too similar, you ought to have at least 2 to 3 values. And I look for what I call bands of color. So if I look at this picture, I didn't put all of this light reflection in yet, but it's slightly lighter because of that at the bottom. Then with these colors, that's a mid value. And then you've got the dark. 3 values that helps lay your water down. If you make them all the same, like right there, it looks more like a wall. I haven't developed that yet. This is getting there. But so like maybe I would make sure to streak in a few more horizontals down here that are lighter. And maybe I don't make them totally, you know, maybe I just make this area lighter that way. But I'm streaking as I go to get that feeling, and I almost white across, but hopefully, but once, if it gets too dark, it might change the view. But hopefully, I'm going to step back and see if that worked a little bit better. I'll do, oh, since you're asking about her, I do like water. I do paint it a lot, paint the river. I'll show the one that, so this, can everybody see this? So you can see the water. To get it to look like it's going back, it's darker here. It's getting a little bit lighter. It's got a little bit of green in here. Then it's almost, it's very soft pink, but there's there's a soft bit of pink in here along with the bluey green. And then you've got more yellow towards here where it's getting land again. But hopefully that should look like the water's going back in space. Same thing with the sky. It's bluer up here. As it gets down to the horizon, it's usually yellower here in Sacramento. I challenge you to look at that because a lot of people just paint blue skies, and especially for the heat of Sacramento, it's too cool for the rest of the painting quite often. You can see I've got several kinds of greens. This was a plein air piece down at William B. Pond. And then I'll try to bring this over. I don't know if this will work. I'm going to turn the light on in my dining room. Hopefully I don't give you, make you seasick, but let me do this and see. This is the piece that, let's see if I can get at least most of it in. I'm tipping too much. There we go. Well, that may be as good as, hang on, I can't level it. Why am I not level? There we go. So here's kind of the same location. It's the same trees, different composition with the water going across, but the same thing of getting the ripples, a lot of horizontal, slightly horizontal, little thin lines, and the chunks of paint are thinner as you go back, which will give you the sense of depth. So that's a 22 by 26 or 28, I think. And then this is the same scene. This is a commission. And this is 36 by 48. Not very intuitive. I'm going, there we go. And so that's a commission, but it's the same place. But more the wintry trees. She wanted more oranges. So the sun on the wintry trees creates more of an orange color. So I pay attention to color, like I said, and I try to notice and not assume that it's green, this color or that color. I try to see those bits of color, and I think that's what creates interest in my paintings. You know, I had somebody say to me once, a longtime friend, we ran into each other and hadn't seen each other for a while. She goes, "Are you still painting where you put those colors in that aren't there?" And I said, "Yes, but they're really there if you look." So that's my challenge to you is don't assume. And really look, and you'll find there's a whole lot more color in things than you think. So any other questions? I think we're close to the end, but you know, I can go further if people want. You know, I don't know what you usually do. Any other areas? I mean, you know, I'm looking at this, so I could take, once again, the same thing. It's darker. There's another red. And there's also some maybe blues in there or something, but getting that second layer, third layer, then you start getting that sense of dimension rather than flat. But I do start fairly flat, big areas, and then I work into them. So I'm happy to send this when I finish it, and you can see the finished thing. It's got more work to be done on this. I thought it would go faster than it did. Any other questions?
Rhonda, you've made everybody want to get out oil paints and a palette knife.
Well, and I have to say, like, some people ask me, can I take your class? I paint in acrylic. Yes, and you can use a palette knife with acrylic, but the trouble is you can see how much I work wet into wet. And acrylic is not as amenable. I know you can put in all those stretchers of, you know, to keep them wet longer, but it just doesn't seem to be worth me to switch. So I've never, and I do not use the water-based oils either. They do something funny, especially with a palette knife if they're starting to dry. I've helped somebody with it, and I'll go to an area with my palette knife and the whole thing lifts up and you see the back of, you know, the canvas. And I'm going, what? You know, I don't have that trouble with my oils. So I've just decided, you know, I'm an oil painter and I do try to keep it off my hands as much as possible. I did pretty well today, got a little on my shirt. And because I'm not using the terp a lot, or Gamsol or any of the solvents. I mean, I do if I use a brush, but with a palette knife, then I'm not breathing those fumes, especially in the house. So I try to be real careful with that. And if I am using a brush, to try to remember to close the lid as much as possible on the solvents. And then even rinsing brushes, then what do? I use my hand to kind of get the brush clean, and then that's all going into your body. We're porous. We don't realize how much we absorb from our hands. And I'll get a funny taste in my mouth if I've used too much terps and stuff and forgot to put the hand thing on there. And so then it's like, okay, that's not good, you know, so I try to be careful. Any other questions? Thank you for inviting me. I hope it was informative. And, you know, if you have questions, feel free to email me, call me. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. This was beautiful work. I really do want to pull oils and try this.
Well, if I've inspired a few to paint, that's the good thing. So thank you once again for inviting me. Maybe one of these days, shops and stuff like that. I think I did teach a workshop with Rockland at one point.
Yes, I think we painted pears.
In pairs?
Yes.
We actually painted a scene very similar to what Rhonda did there. The pears were Patrice.
Oh, okay.
No, that was, I do, like yesterday I said I did somebody was asking how to do glass. She was trying to paint this beautiful blown glass bell and was having trouble. And so I found something that I could use to show. And so then I just decided to make it a class, but I am not a still life painter. I don't have the patience. I don't know what it is, but I get bored before it's really finished. But I think I did a field of flowers. So I think you had the meeting and then we had lunch and then I did a one-day workshop in the afternoon. That's what I think I remember. But my memory's not what it used to be. So thank you once again.
Any questions for Rhonda?
Any more? I'm here. And I'll send, Linda, do you want me to send it to you or what was the other lady's name now? I forgot already. I can send it around if you want to. I can post on the Facebook.
Go ahead and send it to me.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Enjoy painting or sculpting, whatever. I think we need it, especially now.
Yes.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.